The 2023 Formula 1 season has come to an end. We've seen good, we've seen bad, and we've seen ugly. But let's separate the best from the worst as we discuss my top 5 and bottom 5 drivers from this year's 2023 Formula 1 campaign. Let's start with the bad. I think the driver that's had the 5th worst season is Nyck de Vries, and it feels a little bit harsh because we only got to see him on the grid for 10 races. Had Daniel Ricciardo not been waiting in the wings, we maybe would have seen him for a whole season, and we could have seen him improve. Or he could have continued to be terrible and he would have been much higher up on this list. But I think the big thing that played against Nyck de Vries was that he hyped himself up to such a big degree. Yes, he won Formula E and Formula 2, but to come in and say that you don't want people to treat you like a rookie, you're lining yourself up to be under a lot of pressure. And then after he was gotten rid of, you look at how well Liam Lawson did when he came in for just 5 races, which was half the amount of time Nyck de Vries had. And if anything, it makes you wonder how he got the seat over Liam in the first place. However, another ex-Red Bull driver who had to fight for his place on the grid has just put in the season of his career so far. Alex Albon was stunning to watch this season, finished 13th in the championship by an absolute mile compared to the group of drivers behind him. He's really settled into that Williams team perfectly and just seems at complete harmony with their setup. Okay, yes, the car isn't always going to be good enough to score points, but when it has been, Albon has more often than not delivered them and thanked the team by single-handedly delivering them their best constructors finish since 2017. It does feel like he's put himself back into contention for those top seats after being shunned by Red Bull 3 years ago, and if he does decide to make that move up the grid, whoever picks him up is getting an amazing driver, especially if he can keep up the standard of performance that he has in this Williams in a car that can deliver points every single weekend. Or maybe he just stays at Williams and has a lovely time in blue. Now, I know that he finished 2nd in the Drivers' Championship, but his teammate also had more than double his points total, so I don't think it's too harsh to say that Sergio Perez has been terrible in 2023, despite winning 2 races, which is the 2nd most of anybody. Sergio Perez has said himself that he lost the rhythm with this year's car, and that's obvious to see when you look at his average qualifying position across the season, being 9th in what we're calling the most dominant car Formula 1 has ever seen. He did often redeem himself in the races, but he should, in that car, have been so much closer to the podium places almost every single race. His season just seemed to get worse and worse. I think the real moment that summarized his season would have been in Japan, where Max Verstappen comes in, pitting from the lead, and Sergio Perez is sitting in the background in the garage, waiting to go out in a broken car so that he doesn't have a 5-second penalty rolling on to the next race. It's been an absolutely horrible season for Sergio Perez, especially considering where he was 5 races into it. The first non-Red Bull affiliated driver on the list, unless of course you believe the rumours from Christian Horner, is Lewis Hamilton, who I think has been the 4th best driver despite finishing comfortably in 3rd place in the championship. And it goes without saying at this point that if you give Lewis Hamilton a good car, or even a mediocre car, he often puts together performances. And the fact that he was even in the discussion for 2nd place in the driver's standings when the Red Bull has been so fast and the Mercedes so slow speaks for itself. He's once again been so consistent over the course of this year. There is a little bit of recency bias to get over here. There was the Qatar crash that we all felt was coming after the 2 Mercedes drivers just kept bumping into each other over and over again. There was also the final 3 races of the season which didn't really go Lewis Hamilton's way, but a fantastic run in the middle of the season was more than enough to separate himself from both of the Ferraris and his teammate by a considerable margin. Back to the worst, and my 3rd worst driver from this year was Kevin Magnuson, which I think comes from the fact that he and Nico Hülkenberg are in fairly similar areas of their career. They're both very experienced, they've both had years out of Formula 1 and come back into it, so it felt like they were pretty equally matched, and they have been anything but over the course of the 22 race weekends. I think the Haas car has been absolutely terrible, as proven by the fact that it finished last in the constructors' standings, but Nico Hülkenberg had at least a few moments, particularly in qualifying, whereas Kevin Magnuson just didn't. Then you look at the fact that they ditched Mick Schumacher at the end of last year because he was smashing up the car too much, and Gunther Steiner talked about the fact that he wanted 2 really experienced drivers in the car. However, then Kevin this year has decided to take up that mantle and start smashing up the car. I mean, Haas will definitely be looking for a big improvement from Kevin Magnuson next year, especially considering the praise that they've given Ollie Behrman in recent outings with the team. Could Kevin Magnuson be out of a seat once again? And it's another podium position for Lando Norris in my rankings. Of course, the debate around him not winning a race will rumble on, but 6 P2 finishes in a season where first was never really up for grabs, apart from in Singapore, where he also then finished in second place, and when the car didn't even work until 9 races into the year, is very impressive. For me, it's been another season where he's just improved a tremendous amount, which when you're 5 seasons into your Formula 1 career is quite difficult to do. But in my opinion, he just keeps getting better and better every single year. Like, as soon as McLaren delivered him a car that was capable of getting podiums, he stepped up and delivered them a podium straight away. He's also becoming incredibly patient behind the wheel of the McLaren now, and when he goes for an overtaking maneuver, I just trust that he's judged it perfectly and he's going to make it happen. As well as his ability to just get the car home when it really matters on race day, he just needs to get it together slightly more often in qualifying. There's been quite a few errors, especially in this second half of the season, that he himself has been incredibly critical of. And actually, I think he's been a little bit too harsh on himself, because if he can get over those problems in qualifying, he is absolutely flying, and I cannot wait to see what he can do in 2024. Second worst, Lance Stroll. What can I say that hasn't already been said about how bad Lance Stroll's season was overall? Remember, it didn't start off too badly. Considering his wrist injury and the fact that he did miss testing, the first 4-5 races went pretty well. I remember Monaco being poor, and then the Aston Martin in general slowed down around Canada, and then his season just fell off a cliff from that point, especially post-summer break. It was like he'd forgotten how to drive that Formula 1 car. He was absolutely destroyed by Fernando Alonso, and I think we did expect that, but he should have been a lot closer to his teammate. And then of course there was the whole Qatar incident, which just put him under the spotlight even more, and he rightfully received even more criticism because of what happened there. I think it's most frustrating because he is talented and he gets marred with that pay driver brush, and I think the fact that he doesn't have any pressure on him to perform because he knows he can keep that seat for however long he wants doesn't really help him. But we do see instances of really impressive driving. They're just happening so infrequently at this point that I can't see him escaping the discussion around whether or not he's actually going to hold Aston Martin back in the future. Which definitely cannot be said for his teammate, who I have as the second best driver from this season. Fernando Alonso is aging like a fine wine at this point in Formula 1. Of course, the start of the season is what stands out most, picking up 6 podiums in the first 8 races before the Aston Martin downgrades were then added to the car. But even then, when the Aston Martin car was dreadful, sneaking a podium in Zandvoort, holding off Sergio Perez in Brazil, and constantly finishing in the points, meant that he held on to 4th place in the Drivers' Championship, ahead of Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, George Russell, whilst he was in an Aston Martin. It is just mind-blowing to me, and I think it's fair to say that his move from Alpine over to Aston Martin definitely came good, even though everybody was critical of it in 2022. And when Fernando Alonso is at his best, he is just box office. Whether it's on track or off track, he's always entertaining, and I know that it's going to be really tough for Aston Martin with the rest of the top teams progressing into next year, but there's still a part of me that really wants and is desperate to see Fernando Alonso win just one last time. The driver that I think has had the worst season, however, probably doesn't come as much of a surprise. I think it's been Logan Sargeant. I know that he was rushed into the Williams a year early, and the team would have preferred that he stayed in Formula 2 for an extra year, got that extra year of experience in that series with maybe Nick de Vries or Oscar Piastri coming in alongside Alex Albon. However, this season, the Williams for the first time in a long time has looked like a fairly decent car, and then you look at the points gap between him and Albon, the fact that he only managed his point finish due to some disqualifications in Austin, and actually he was looking like the only driver to take part in all events and not pick up any points, and then also the fact that he was delivered a 22-0 in qualifying when that was supposed to be his main strength. I mean, he had the whole season to improve and just show a little bit of quality, and yet we got to the final 3 or 4 race weekends and we were still waiting for something to happen. Even as a rookie, it's been a really tough watch when it comes to Logan Sargeant, and there's a reason that James Vowles waited a very long time to decide whether the American was going to stay on the grid for 2024. But possibly the most predictable name on this entire list, and my driver of the 2023 season, of course, is Max Verstappen. He couldn't win 19 out of 22 races and not also win this too. In terms of his performances, it's hard not to say that this has been the best individual season that we've ever seen in Formula One history, toppling records that have been set since the 50s and 60s, breaking records set by Hamilton, Vettel, Schumacher, Mansell, Clark. Honestly, if it's a record and it exists, he's most likely destroyed it. Nobody has been able to do the things that Max Verstappen has been able to do in this Red Bull car, the consistency to never let up, even the slightest amount, and deliver weekend after weekend, race after race. He was just robotic in his performances, and I don't want to see it again because I would love to see some more competitive seasons, but you have to respect greatness when you're witnessing it. I'm sure there will be a lot of debate around this in the comments. I was very close to putting Leclerc and Piastri in my top 5, and I was very close to putting both Alfa Romeo drivers into my bottom 5, but I would absolutely love to know your 2023 driver rankings in the comments down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, I also made this video here about all of the records that Max Verstappen has broken over the course of the 2023 season, so click that link and I'll see you over there.